Hello and thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. Here's what we're looking at.
These radical attacks on our libraries have divided our communities.
Illinois Secretary of State testifies in Congress on book bans.
One-on-one with Ukraine's former First Lady on the country's ongoing war and her Chicago roots.
And celebrating jazz on the South Side, arts correspondent Angel Ito joins us live from the Englewood Jazz Fest with a preview.
And now to some of today's top stories. City Council votes to approve $25 million in legal settlements. This for lawsuits brought by two men who spent a combined 34 years in prison before being exonerated. Tyrone Hood served 22 years after being convicted of the murder of basketball star Marshall Morgan Jr. Wayne Washington spent 12 years in prison after pleading guilty to the slaying. Both convictions were later vacated after evidence emerged that implicated Morgan's father. Mayor Brandon Johnson offered an apology to the two men and their families.
These families that were tortured and brutalized into false confession, on behalf of the city of Chicago, we are sorry. These are mostly black men. It's painful.
All city libraries have been shuttered today due to what police are calling, quote, digital bomb threats. People were reportedly evacuated from the libraries earlier this afternoon after the calls came in, although police say they do not believe the threats are credible at this point. This comes after a rash of suburban libraries have closed temporarily in recent weeks for the same reason. No injuries have been reported in connection with any of these threats so far.
The Chicago Department of Public Health is advising residents to get the new COVID-19 vaccine, which is being shipped this week.
Those elderly people who are immunocompromised anyway, and that can be, youngest children, are really at risk for having more severe disease. And also, even though they've been vaccinated, their antibodies wane over time. And so it's important to get another vaccine.
CDPH says the new vaccines, one each from Pfizer-BioNTech and one from Moderna, should be available in clinics and pharmacies in Chicago within 5 to 12 days. Officials say COVID-19 hospital admissions in Illinois and most of the country are low, but rates are climbing. They say if it has been at least 2 months since your last vaccine, it's recommended that you get this new one.
The city's oldest continuously operating food pantry is getting a new permanent home for the first time. Common Pantry has been housed in the basement of Epiphany United Church in Christ North Center. That's for the last 36 years. At its new location, the pantry will provide a large communal dining space, a commercial kitchen for a hot lunch program, and a grocery shopping area.
Coming up in the program, Ukraine's former First Lady on the state of the Russia-Ukraine war.
First, a Capitol Hill hearing on book bans. Illinois Secretary of State was there to testify and tells us right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
The Illinois Secretary of State's office is usually associated with driver's licenses and long lines. But Alexi Giannoulias is leaning into his role as the state's librarian, successfully pushing Illinois lawmakers to pass his first-in-the-nation ban on book bans in Illinois schools and public libraries. This week, he faced some tough questions at a U.S. Senate hearing about book bans that are sweeping and dividing the nation. That as more libraries are threatened by violence, including today, where, as we mentioned, all Chicago libraries closed and evacuated after bomb threats. Joining us to talk about that and more is Illinois Secretary of State Alexi Giannoulias. Mr. Secretary, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
So today, all of Chicago's libraries were shut down, as were others around the state this week because of threats of violence. What, in your position, can you do to help?
Well, first of all, my heart breaks for all the librarians, staff, families that have relied on our libraries to be a welcoming center, a safe place for their kids to go and read books and discover new worlds, place for parents to be able to pick them up after school. So it's heartbreaking, it's terrifying, it's deeply depressing. And the irony is, as I was on Capitol Hill fighting on behalf of librarians that are dealing with threats of violence and intimidation, the likes of which they've never seen, being forced to close their doors because they can't find librarians who want to work anymore. As I'm literally fighting for librarians because of our legislation, libraries are being forced to evacuate and close their doors because of these bomb threats. So it's troubling times, and I hope the craziness stops.
So you were in Washington this week, as we mentioned, testifying before the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee. What were you hoping to accomplish? Are you hoping to push for federal legislation? And to Senator Graham's point, are libraries a local issue?
Yes, but they're also a parental issue too. And the point that this legislation makes is book banning has never been good for democracy. We have to trust our librarians who have advanced degrees in library science, library and information science, to determine what books belong in circulation. We can't have one or two, fringe elements or parents who don't like a certain worldview or viewpoint to have the ability to eliminate a book from circulation for an entire community. That's the whole purpose of our legislation, to trust our librarians and to trust parents. And unfortunately, on Capitol Hill, Republican senators turned into a partisan issue. They read pornography out loud, which has nothing to do with our bill whatsoever. What we're saying is we have to increase perspectives, increase empathy, let people read books about LGBTQ issues and by books by authors that happen to be African American. So it was a dangerous misdirection. I'm proud of our bill in Illinois, and hopefully other states follow suit.
You mentioned what some of the senators read, and you got some tough grilling from the Republicans. Here's a look at that exchange with U.S. Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana. Here he reads from the book Genderqueer, and viewers should be forewarned, there is some very graphic language here.
I can't wait to have your cock in my mouth. I'm going to give you the blowjob of your life, then I want you inside of me. Are you suggesting that only librarians should decide whether the two books that I just referenced should be available to kids? Is that what you're saying?
No.
Okay. Tell me what you're saying.
Well, first of all, there's this...
Don't give me a speech. Tell me what you're asking me to do.
With all due respect, Senator, the words you spoke are disturbing, especially coming out of your mouth is very disturbing. But what I would also tell you that we're not advocating for kids to read porn.
Like we said, graphic. Mr. Secretary, your first reaction was the word disturbing. What do you mean by that?
No, I just think, you realize when you get to Washington, D.C., there's a lot of showboating. There's people who are just there to give speeches. They didn't want to hear about our legislation because they know that it's a losing battle, because we're talking about freedom of speech, freedom to learn, what has always made us a great democracy, and fundamentally what education means, which is to allow children to think for themselves. Instead, they talk about porn. They try the shock and awe factor, which is what now we're talking about, as opposed to efforts by different individuals to ban books like The Adventures of Huck Finn, 1984, Of Mice and Men, To Kill a Mockingbird, which are being pulled off library shelves because people don't like, certain individuals don't like the worldview that it represents. It's dangerous, it's scary, it's not what this country has always been about. The Republicans know they can't fight on that issue, so they sensationalize porn, which is not what anyone's talking about.
Before we let you go, I want to jump over to, of course, another part of your job, which is, of course, driver's licenses. And you've implemented a new Skip the Line program by requiring folks to make appointments at drivers' facilities. How's that going so far?
Since day one, when I took over as Secretary of State, we listen to people and they don't want to wait in line. People are sick and tired of waiting in line. So we implemented this appointment system, and now if you need driver services, you schedule an appointment. We've made it as easy as possible. We have a website, we have a phone number, and the important point that we want to make is, for most people, you don't have to go to a facility. If you have a safe driving record, you get it in the mail, you can go online. A lot of the work that we're trying to do is to modernize the office, to bring in new technology, to eliminate the time tax that too many Illinoisans are paying just to access simple government services.
Everybody knows DMVs the world over are notorious for having long lines. What is your advice, though, to folks who may not be so tech savvy, may not have access to making those online reservations?
Again, we have a phone number for folks to call. They can call and schedule an appointment. If they want to go to a facility, we have tablets at our facilities. We can make an appointment for them. So again, the goal here is to make this as easy as possible. The number one complaint we've heard, and that you mentioned is a national joke, we want to eliminate the lines at the facilities. Our goal is to do it. We will get it done. There obviously will be a learning curve. People are doing the same thing for a long time, but I am confident that we're going to make people's lives easier, more efficient, and less time consuming.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. Illinois Secretary of State Alexi Giannoulias, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Up next, we meet the former First Lady of Ukraine. But first, a look at the weather.
We're joined now by a native Chicagoan who has a unique perspective on Russia's ongoing war in Ukraine. That's because she not only lives in the country, she was its former First Lady. Kateryna Yushchenko was born in Chicago, worked in the White House under former Presidents Reagan and Bush, and then married Viktor Yushchenko, who would go on to become Ukraine's president from 2005 to 2010, famously suffering a near-death poisoning during his election campaign. And joining us now is Kateryna Yushchenko. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome to Chicago tonight.
Thank you for having me.
And you're back in town over the next week for some events with your husband, former President Yushchenko. How does it feel a year and a half into the war in Ukraine to be back in Chicago right now?
Well, it's always lovely to be back in your hometown, but we're here for a mission, and that's to talk about what's happening in our country, to meet with Ukrainians who have who've been forced to come to the United States because of the war in Ukraine. We're here to commemorate the Ukrainian genocide famine of 1932-33.
This is the 90th anniversary of that.
It's the 90th anniversary, and there is a foundation here that is holding a series of events that we will be attending over the next few days.
So a lot of events in a big Ukrainian American community, as you know, in Chicago.
Yes.
Your parents came here as emigres.
Yes,
You were born here in
Yes.
Chicago. You grew up in Humboldt Park. What do you remember about growing up here in Chicago?
Well, we grew up as part of the Ukrainian community. I was born near Humboldt Park, but then we moved to Mount Prospect, and we were always very involved in the Ukrainian community, which was always very strong, very committed. Ukraine is a country that has been striving for its independence and its freedom for many centuries, and wave after wave of Ukrainians had to come here as immigrants, and now we're seeing the new wave. And my parents were one of those. They came here after the Second World War.
And of course, you now have moved back to Ukraine. You were the First Lady from 2005 to 2010. You've lived in Kiev for the bulk of Russia's war in Ukraine over the last year and a half. What is Kiev like right now on the ground? What is it like to live there?
Well, I have to say that we're all very angry, sad, tired, but very confident. You know, we're angry because the death and destruction continue. We hear every day about people getting killed, children being orphaned, new bombs. You know, we're very sad because sometimes we lose the best and the brightest. We're tired because we're up almost every night with air raids. And we're worried because we hear that the world might be fatigued from our war and may not support us as much as they did before or as they should. On the other hand, we're very confident in our victory. Our country is united as never before. For generations, we have fought for our freedom and independence. We feel this is our last stand, and we will win.
And you talk about that 30-plus year battle for freedom and independence from Russia, and that battle between democracy and authoritarianism. Your husband, former Viktor Yushchenko, was pro-West, pro-democratic. He was poisoned during his campaign in 2005. Do you remember the moments that you found out that he had been poisoned? What happened?
Well, he was running a campaign against the entrenched powers that were very close to Russia. And when he made it clear that Ukraine would be moving away from Russia, including taking Sevastopol back by treaty, we were supposed to get it back in 2017, the Russians went very strongly against him and poisoned him. And I do remember it very clearly, and it was very obvious what had happened. And indeed, anybody who had been involved in the poisoning moved to Russia almost immediately.
And you're pretty sure that Russia and Vladimir Putin had to have been behind it?
It's absolutely been proven, because the poison that was used against him, the type of dioxin used against him, was only found in Russia. And as I said, most of the people involved moved to Russia. And it was in Russia's interest. They honestly wanted him to, they couldn't imagine a pro-Western, pro-European Ukrainian leader in office. They wanted someone who would be their
and this was Viktor
puppet.
Yanukovych, who you refer to as a possible puppet. And he did win, but then the elections were declared fraudulent. Yes. And upon review, your husband then won and became president. And how difficult was his push to institute a pro-Western democracy in Ukraine at that time, given the pressures of Russia?
He won because the Ukrainian people went to the streets by the millions. They went to the streets to demand freedom and a European path for their future. They no longer wanted to be under Russia. It was difficult because the country was divided politically, and he never had a parliamentary majority that was able to push through his reforms. And so it was a very, very difficult 5 years, including a tremendous disinformation from Russia. And in fact, I think it was a hybrid war that began then, and so many of the tactics later used in Europe and the United States in terms of disinformation, of cyber attacks, of so many other things were tried out on Ukraine first.
It bears mentioning that the person running your husband's opponent's campaign, Viktor Yanukovych, it was Paul Manafort, who also for a time ran Trump's 2016 campaign. What do you make of that?
Well, I think that the Manafort learned a lot about Russian disinformation tactics that he then tried to use in the United States.
And obviously the United States has been dealing with disinformation, especially on social media, for a long time now. You mentioned that you're worried that the appetite for helping Ukraine in the West might be drying up. What's your message to those who might be wary of continually sending aid to Ukraine? Well,
I think it's very important, and it's not an exaggeration to say that what happens in Ukraine will very much determine the future of the world, because if Ukraine does not win, authoritarians, dictators around the world will be emboldened. If the richest and most democratic and freedom-loving countries of the world cannot come together and eliminate an aggressor that's committing genocide right on their border, what hope is there for freedom fighters in Africa and Asia and Latin America? On the other hand, if Ukraine is victorious, I think it will reinvigorate freedom and democracy around the world.
What is it like on the ground right now? I mean, how difficult is it going to be for Ukraine to sustain its defense against Russia? And how long can they?
Well, we're very grateful for the support we have, but no matter what support we get, we will continue to fight, and we're determined as a nation. We're united as never before, and 90% of the people want to continue to fight no matter what. It's a difficult road. If we had gotten all the weapons that we had needed, we could have ended this quickly, but they came very slowly, and as a result, it's taking us longer than we would like. We have more losses than we hoped to have. On the other hand, I know that we will win, and hopefully next year.
And your husband is here in town with you, and I think we're going to talk to him on Monday. Does he still feel the effects of that poisoning today, the health effects?
Of course, of course. He had tens of thousands over the dose that's allowed for a human being. They meant to kill him. And of course, it was very difficult.
There was no legal recourse for what happened.
We know what happened, but no, there is none.
Tell us a little bit more about some of the events that you're going to be attending over the next week.
Tomorrow we have a symposium at the Rotary Club where we will be speaking about the Ukrainian famine and the Holodomor, and that genocide that we saw in 32-33 was just one in a series of genocidal acts that continue to this day. If you go to Bucha, if you go to Irpin, you see the same genocide that happened in those very same regions 90 years ago. Then there will be a memorial service at the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. There will be a memorial concert. We will be meeting with children, Ukrainian children who have emigrated here, and talk to them. So, and we have something with the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. So there will be a number of different events.
A full slate of events to get your message out and to talk about this very, very important geopolitical situation right now. Kateryna Yushchenko, thank you for being here. Welcome back to Chicago.
Thank you so much.
And up next, a preview of this year's Englewood Jazz Fest, so please stay with us.
The Englewood Jazz Fest kicks off on the South Side in Hamilton Park tonight. Arts correspondent Angel Ito joins us live as attendees are heading in. Hey, Angel.
Hey, Brandis. Yes, that's right. Now, the Englewood Jazz Festival is celebrating 24 years this year, and through those decades, they've been committed to building a musical community at what's known to be as, quote, the Ravinia of the South Side. How interesting. Well, I was able to sit down with two budding journalists who have been a part of the Englewood Jazz Festival's youth ensemble that's been geared toward educating the youth or getting them exposed to jazz music specifically. Take a look. In just their mid-20s, Isaiah Collier and Alexis Lambre have already been performing for more than half of their lifetime.
I've been leading my own band since I was 14 years old, since I was in high school.
How's everybody doing?
And even though at the time it was like wedding receptions and, you know, little private functions, it really gave me a sense of, I don't know, like just a young business owner.
They've been described as young prodigies, if you will, by colleagues in their field. And it's a reason their mentor of sorts, Ernest Dawkins, believes they're the perfect artists to represent the future of the Englewood Jazz Festival.
They're the future generation, and they come out of our programs. Why would we not produce them?
They were both members of the Young Masters Ensemble, a free program for kids to learn jazz music. Now, Dawkins says it's Collier's fusion, among other factors, that make him stand out.
He's learned from so many influences. I can hear bits and pieces of everything. He's absorbed the entire totality.
I'm actually going to be the artist in residence for it, so I'll be there all 3 days. On the 15th, I'm going to be playing with my ensemble, the Chosen Few. The project we're mostly emphasizing for this run is something we call the Almighty, which is more of a part 2 to the record we did at Rudy Van Gelder's, which that project was entitled Cosmic Transitions. And really, it's more of it's an introspective album.
For Lambre, Dawkins says it's her drive.
I like Alexis because she has an energy and she's ambitious. You see what I'm saying? You don't find that in a lot of people.
Well, I'm excited because this is my first time at the Englewood Jazz Festival as a leader, leading my own group, and I am debuting some compositions. Well, I'm debuting a piece that is centered around my synesthesia. So synesthesia means that two senses are mixed or felt at the same time. So I see color and when I hear music.
And as the festival looks ahead to 25 years, Dawkins says their goal will still be focused on celebrating music where it originated.
The music has come from this community along with blues and other kind of diasporic kind of aesthetics. So why should it be here? When I was coming up, the music was in the community, and I want these young people to be involved. We want them to further their careers. We want them to be successful. We want people to see that young people their age can do it. Like we have the young masters, some of them are 17 years old. So when we're playing for people that are their age, they say, wow, I can do that too.
Now, the Englewood Jazz Festival kicks off tonight here in Hamilton Park. As you can see behind me, folks are still coming in with the first program beginning shortly in 10 minutes at 6 p.m. And then if you missed tonight, you're welcome to come back tomorrow, and then they'll be here all day on Saturday for a full festival. Live in Hamilton Park, I'm Angelito. Brandis, we go back to you.
Sounds like a good show, Angel. Hope you get to enjoy it. Thank you. And that's our show for this Thursday night. Don't forget, you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website.
And you can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And now for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Paris Schutz.
And I'm Brandis Friedman. Thanks for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm whose attorneys embrace a culture of philanthropy and service by volunteering their time, expertise, and guidance to help others in the greater Chicago community.